CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Malawi's Electoral Commission says final results will be delayed despite 99% of the results already received. Several suspected kidnappers hit Tripoli's luxury hotel where anti-Haftar lawmakers have been meeting. In just a moment, but first, Uche Okoronkwo with the day's business headlines. Uche.
Thank you, Beatrice. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. The IMF warns that Tunisia gets a green light to issue an $800 million bond. Of course, all that coming up within the program. But now it's back to you.
The Commission says it has received 99% of the results, although only 75% have since been announced. It also says it is delaying announcing all results due to over 147. Peter Mutharika is in a close race with his main challenger, Lazarus Chakwera, as the two lead a pack of 8 presidential candidates. Macron has urged all parties to refrain from announcing premature results.
The Commission continues to determine results on have received full results. The Commission will continue meeting to determine on parliamentary and local government election results.
Krista Nyabwa, she's in Blantyre. Well, Krista.
Thank you, Beatrice. Well, the Malawi Electoral Commission started off by saying that it is with results. It does say that there have been 147 complaints and that according to the law that it is on the results and determining who is the winner one way or another. So for that reason, they have said the Electoral Commission Chair, Dr. Jane Ansah, that eventually the numbers that would come out could be taken as the gospel truth. And therefore, for that reason, she does say that while the Commission has 8 days, the parties who have lodged these complaints are also satisfied that they have been heard and that there is. And yet, despite the fact that the board shows clearly that over 99% of the updates are in, there will be no such briefing. And
in terms of the complaints that have been lodged, though, what are some of these complaints that the Commission says the candidates and parties have filed?
In some instances, there were cases where Tipex was supposed to have been used in the forms that were filled, and therefore the in-depth was also a case where a returning officer in one particular region disappeared with the forms that had the final tally that of the numbers that should have been relayed to the gating. These are some of the complaints that the Commission wants to just get to the bottom of before, but also to the parliamentary polls and also just the election of ward councillors. So it's not just the presidential election, but could end up impacting the presidential vote. So for that reason, the Commission is just taking its time.
And in terms of reactions, though, delay in announcing the final result?
Well, the parties do have representatives in the hall because the same results that they got from the ground. But so far, it has been very calm. It has been very quiet. Most people just holding their cards. Certainty. There's also a bit of anticipation as a few hope that their candidates will be declared the winners. But that will then decide in which way they decide to go, whether they will be challenging this or whether they will be accepting the results as a free and fair.
There. In Nairobi, Kenya, it is a blow to gay activists. The High Court has rejected a bid to decriminalize homosexuality, a case filed in the Penal Code unconstitutional.
Having filed that the petitioner's attack on the constitutional validity of sections 162 and 1, accordingly, the consolidated petitions have no merit. We hereby decline the relief sought and dismiss the consolidated petitions.
Ransom continue rising in the northern region. Analysts blame it on an
The reported seizure of their weapons brings to the fore the rising.
Includes one AK-47 rifle with 4 rounds of live ammunition, 2 locally made pistols with cartridge and...
From relatives of their victims. Zamfara is the home region of Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari. Boko Haram and its function ISWAP, poverty and desperation are being blamed for the rise in cases of kidnapping for ransom.
Kidnap and collect ransom. I refused, but they forced me into the act. after threatening to kill me.
The first quarter of this year, 2019, part of the total of 685 kidnappings reported in Nigeria as a whole in that period. Blessed. Chomgono, CGTN.
In Sudan, protest leaders have said they will seek advice from rule. Talks between the two sides have been suspended since Monday after demonstrators who have been rallying for weeks outside the army complex in Khartoum and in other cities to come up with a solution. Spontaneous demonstrations in parts of Khartoum in support of the protest movement. Later, scores of medics held a rally in front of a hospital in the capital and expressed their solidarity with the protesters. Medics said the anti-Bashir campaign. Let's now to Khalifa Haftar's eastern forces who are trying to capture the capital. The Interior Ministry has published images of the damage, but the resource is closer to the city center. Since April, there have been 126 confirmed civilian casualties and 75,000 for support. You're watching Africa Live, still ahead on the program. The UN Secretary General decried
stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. Among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile.
And in North Africa, no one else will show you what it's all about.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Held a special ceremony to commemorate the International Day of UN Peacekeepers. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres says despite advances in the protection of civilians, grave human suffering is still being caused by...
While addressing an open debate of the Security Council, the United Nations Secretary General noted the progress that has been made in technical assistance to support the investigation and prosecution of crimes, also made to enhance compliance with the laws of war.
First, to the conflict. Second, principled and sustained engagement by humanitarian organizations and others with non-state armed groups to negotiate safe and timely humanitarian access.
Which protects civilians from physical harm, but also from the invisible psychological harm from abuses like sexual violence, torture in detention, or not knowing the fate of missing loved ones.
In 1960, the first peacekeeping operation in Africa was deployed in the Republic of Congo. Since Mozambique, Somalia, Sierra Leone, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Burundi and Sudan. Susan Mongeli, CGTN.
The UK Prime Minister Theresa May gave an emotional speech on Downing Street, announcing she will step down after repeated failures to get a Brexit plan approved. Theresa May says she'll resign as head of the Conservative Party on June the 7th.
Our politics may be under strain, but there is so much that is good about this country, so much to be proud of. So, the second female Prime Minister, gratitude to have had the opportunity to serve the country I love.
Theresa May said it can only be reached if all sides are willing to compromise. Meanwhile, opposition Labour Party leader Jeremy Corbyn says an election for a new Prime Minister is necessary.
What the long-term strategy is of that government, I think we need a general election. We don't need another.
Elephant hunting in the country. The resolution, which was announced on Thursday, has sparked some criticism from some Conservatives in place 5 years ago by former President Ian Khama. CGTN's Tulisha Balala shares the latest developments.
Conservation elephant hunting. The country's Department of Wildlife and National Parks says it lacked the capacity to properly enforce the ban or deal with its consequences
in our ecosystem. So it must be clear from the outset and understood it was a suspension. Those who chose to call it a ban, call it a ban. Conservation is in our DNA. We have never that. Our responsibility to conservation has not changed, but our responsibility for our people as well has not changed, and we must.
Its largest population. The animal causes damage to human communities as well as natural resources.
And that will never happen in Botswana. This is why we have dedicated 40% of our country to conservation, wildlife management, and the sacrifice that Botswana have made.
Many of Botswana's elephants for a global ban on elephant ivory trade to be relaxed due to the growing number of animals in some regions. Tuli Shabalala, CGTN.
In South Sudan, art students have been holding an exhibition on sexual violence. Signed last year, the UN says rape and sexual assault are still prevalent in the country. CGTN
of communication. South Sudanese art students from the University of Juba have been holding an exhibition.
You can see in traditional way, they don't allow women to be part of the traditional whatever. Women are like, you can see in painting, women are seated very far away.
They might be saving the woman. Here, no respect for women. They just start shouting of her, beating the woman. It's supposed these things should not happen.
It is an opportunity to reach 8,000 students from different tribes, as well as thousands more visitors from the surrounding community.
Why should this be? Why should people perpetrate violence against women? It needs to stop. The feedback we are getting is so wonderful. Some of the people are showing remorse. Connect them back to their experiences.
After 6 years of armed conflict, the students say they are trying to rebuild their culture. Many students' truck already sold to local art lovers. Daniel Arab Moy, CGTN.
Officially recognized the two countries after they reported 0 malaria cases in the last 3 years. The addition of Algeria and Argentina now brings the total number of
that spans hundreds of years, and the battle against the disease has been hard fought.
These are the efforts that we've made since independence in 1962. They are based on efforts by health professionals who have integrated and adhere to the recommendations from the World Health Organization.
The World Health Organization has given us their support in every moment, and without their experience, we would not have accomplished this. As a country, we have obtained the certification, and we celebrate this by lowering our arms. We will continue to support them, and we know their challenges.
Algeria and Argentina last reported cases of indigenous malaria in 2013 and 2010 respectively. Their subsequent success in eliminating malaria can be attributed to provision of free diagnosis and treatment within their borders.
Through good surveillance, through good investment, and also through having established a primary health care system that has gone a long way towards universal health coverage. This will encourage and I'm certain inspire the rest of the continent because we know that there is much still to be done in the African continent and in the region to get on top of the malaria program.
Transmitted through the bite of female Anopheles mosquito, malaria remains one of the world's leading killers, but the disease is both preventable and treatable. Chom Wono, CGTN.
Chinese construction company China Jiangxi Corporation for International Economic and Technical Cooperation has officially handed over Kenya's Kenyatta University Teaching and Referral Hospital to the Kenya government. The project, which was financed through the concessional loan of the Chinese government to healthcare functions. Kenyatta University Hospital is expected to provide medical and health services for the whole nation. It will relieve the burden of the current 2 existing central hospitals in Kenya. The hospital is expected to start its operations in August.
Indeed, it gives me great pleasure to be present and to witness this milestone, the end of a journey that began with a lot of courage and very deep visioning of the leadership of Kenyatta University and all other stakeholders. Well done, you've done a very good job, and we want to thank you for what you've done for this country.
The Kenyatta University Hospital project is funded by Chinese government concession loan project undertaking, all ready to serve the people of Kenya. As the contractor, I'm proud of we complete this work.
In Tunisia, Muslims have gathered to pray alongside Jews at Africa's oldest synagogue. The group shared a fast-breaking meal, a symbol of cohabitation that Tunisia is keen to promote. Muslims in the group say a majority of their prayers have been granted after visiting the Griba synagogue. The synagogue is located in the Mediterranean island of Jebba. This is where Jews go to ask a mysterious saint to grant their wishes. Muslims in Tunisia have been participating in the pilgrimage for over 15 years.
I think this pilgrimage will go down in history for several reasons. One, because it's the times.
And let's now go to Uche for the latest business news. Uche.
Thanks, Beatrice. And coming up on Africa Live Biz, the IMF warns that the trade dispute between China and the US will hurt global growth prospects in 2018. Investment
$1 billion here. If you take 10% of that and you devote it.
Business in Africa is at the crossroads where opportunity meets innovation, where bustling free market. It's colorful, vibrant deal makers and actors who
supply chains. The IMF said the projected recovery in global, the latest escalation could see sticks on imports from China, in the ex-tariff border prices of imports from worth up to $800 million this year, now of 6.8%. Now, authorities say the statement.
The Committee on Finance Planning, or its equivalent in euros, with an interest rate of 6%.
Maximum will be $800 million will opt for external bonds,
which shows a deficit of 4,512
state budget of IMF, African Development Bank,
to mobilize resources through foreign loans.
Because the economy is facing difficulties, now the situation is improving into.
Opposition estimates that the high amount of the loan will worsen the debt.
Tunisia needs around $2.5 billion in external financing into a budget. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
The intellectual property right joint venture with one of its key shareholders, that's South Africa's
National Service Platform from Britain's Vodafone. Is pay to Vodafone and expand the service to new African markets.
We've got, so it's not about the scale, but it's about the related party transaction that requires us to get approvals of our board and our shareholders and requires them.
But in East Africa pays 2% of its annual M-Pesa revenue to Vodafone. Revenue from M-Pesa stood at $741 million in Safaricom's fund in intellectual property fee to Vodafone from its M-Pesa business, which is mainly in Tanzania. In January, Safaricom launched an overdraft facility for M-Pesa.
Determining the future and the roadmap of M-Pesa, because at the moment the roadmap is determined by Vodafone. It is right for us to be determined. If you take things like overdraft, for example, we came up with overdraft, not Vodafone.
One of the new markets Safaricom has it.
The mobile payments market, the telecom markets, and the banking sector. We think there could be opportunities that we can explore, but
Britain's Vodafone has a 5%.
Now, South Africa's Reserve Bank's decision to keep rates on hold has been widely welcomed. The SARB chose to keep the repo rate with the prime lending rate at a minimum of 10.25%. Many South Africans are hoping that the Reserve Bank will offer a rate cut as some relief. While Sumitra
seems to be under control. Food inflation in particular has declined. Concerns about rising household debt. Fuel prices have jumped since the beginning of the year. Electricity prices too are going to be hiked further.
At the moment, the economy is likes of fuel prices, the likes of administered prices, electricity, water, and etc. So that boost from lower than expected inflation will somehow be counteracted.
The domestic challenges and geopolitics. But ordinary South Africans are feeling the financial pressure, having to spread less on more.
Inflation is around, but again, remember that the Reserve Bank's MPC is forward-looking, so they are also concerned about the outlook for inflation. The unpredictability of the rand, it's going to give the Reserve Bank's excuse to keep rates unchanged rather than.
And the huge unemployment is also the main cause of that thing.
There's a lot of things that are affecting us that I really need, like
You know, I don't go out to take my family out, maybe on lunch, maybe during
later this year or early next year. It's a stretch though for those trying to pay off debt, especially those people that are living on credit just to get reforms and revive this economy. Sumitra Nadu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
And meanwhile, South Africa's competition amendment bill was passed into law and the bill was signed off. CGTN's Angelo Coppola with more on that.
From the lawyers, I want to turn to
the amendments to the Act are still in the pipeline.
Because so much of what triggers the regulatory oversight and the kind of thumb on the scale, even under the amendments, really still depends upon some concept of market power.
There's now a duty on dominant firms not just not to exclude competitors, but there now seems to be saying there's a category of to not use that buyer power, as it were, in a way that discriminates against the small guy or historically disadvantaged.
I think from an economic point of view, we are very worried about the fact that there's this idea that buyer power, which we find strange from an economic perspective.
The amendments can be implemented any day now. Lawyers and economists are holding their collective breaths.
And they might well take the chance and come along, and I think that's where it will become messy, not because they're small. You know, how does council react to that? So there's a lot of uncertainties in this terrain at the moment.
The amendments to the South African Competition Act. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
The economic implications of Prime Minister Theresa May's tearful exit from office. Of course, all that coming up top of the hour. For now, back to you.
Senegal's only female army pilot tries to inspire more women into aviation.
Greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir
to the wonders of Africa. CGTN
AfricaLive.
And we're receiving news just in that at least 7 people. Emmanuel Macron has described the blast as an attack, adding that no deaths had been reported. At least 7 people, as Emmanuel Macron has described the blast as more details in our army. It is a craft she has been practicing since 2014 in an area largely dominated.
The national 2 flights per day.
At the end of my studies, I had a choice of applying to the armed forces. I passed the exam successfully and joined the force. 2 years after my training, the equipment project started. After an in-house testament
to her colleagues,
Captain Lowe was able to gendarmerie.
She knows how to fly our aircraft.
The Sarah is ultralight, but to scale as far.
Warn that the stigma continues to make it difficult for people living. Begins early in childhood and lasts throughout a person's lifetime. CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai has more.
Preparing for school, Olivia Bafo-Ewa is mother of 16-year-old and communication skills.
If people are aware that this is the condition, these are some of their behaviors. You know, there's somebody in my church. As soon as we enter,
Ghana's 2016 inclusive education policy seeks to increase access. Organizations have to enroll their children in an autism center, which costs $2,500. They believe their work is key to unearthing their potential so they can be independent as they grow up. And they want society to give people with autism.
Our children with autism are how they would behave. If I come to you and I tell you that I have teenagers, milk or Milo or anything of that sort on the shelf, because you understand, you'd give me that opportunity.
Advocates of autism awareness are also
children, cares, and I want to eliminate that notion. That's why I'm trying to force so that they'll be included in so many things that we do. We have some who paint, we have children living with autism.
With increased awareness and the needed support, Olivia Bafo-Ewa believes people with autism can live a better life. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
And you're head of the CAF Champions League final against the 2017 champions Wydad Casablanca.
Africa, we're champ for every knockout, for every step of the way.
Holders Esperance will lead to the Democratic Republic of Congo, where TP Mazembe failed to overturn their deficit. More on the defending champions' preparations.
Reigning African champions Esperance de Tunis held Champions League final.
Yes, Tunis staff, administration, supporters and players are involved in the final. We are determined to win the title. We'll do our maximum to win.
Both legs. This time, the first leg match in Morocco will be decisive.
Esperance and Wydad hope to give a good impression on two North African teams. We need a positive result to be comfortable in the second leg match.
We must score in Morocco.
Trophy holder Casablanca on charter flights to support Esperance. At stake will be a $2.5 million prize money for the champion.
Tunisia's Espérance Sportive de Tunis and Morocco's Wydad on aggregate. Aden Cheweshi, CGTN, Tunis.
Sare Nkusi Kumalo is the first after earlier expeditions were foiled by frostbite, an avalanche and a deadly earthquake. She is urging fellow Africans to follow in her
title. It is an opportunity, but I'm very much aware and cognizant of the fact, that we also got a seat at the table. The mountain was first summited in 1953. What have we been waiting for? And I'm